My son told the police I was losing my mind when they found the body in my garden. They believed him, of course. A disgraced surgeon, still carrying the weight of his past mistakes. I had until nightfall to gather my things before they moved me to a care facility for evaluation. So I feigned confusion about where I left my reading glasses and shuffled toward the basement door. The lock clicked softly under my trembling fingers. Down there, in the cold concrete silence, I needed to find proof that I wasn't the senile old woman my son claimed. The musty air clung to my skin as I swept the beam of my flashlight over surgical tools left carelessly on a metal tray. A sharp scent of antiseptic mixed with something coppery made my stomach turn. I knew I had to uncover what really happened before they took me away. If I failed, I would lose my home, my freedom, everything I'd built over 72 years. My son kept hounding me constantly. He'd called twice already, his voice dripping with false concern, warning me to rest and not wander. Then, my light caught a glint under the operating table, a small silver key I'd never seen before. It felt cold and foreign in my palm. I slipped it into my apron pocket just as the floorboards above creaked with heavy footsteps. Someone was coming down. I hid behind a stack of dusty boxes as the basement door swung open. My son's voice echoed, tense and low, speaking to someone on the phone. "It's handled," he said. "She won't remember a thing." His shoes scuffed near the surgical area, and I held my breath. My heart hammered against my ribs. I needed to get that key to the shed outside, where I kept my late husband's old lockbox. If I could link it to my son's secrets, I might stop this nightmare. But moving meant noise, and noise meant discovery. If I was caught, he'd have me committed before I could blink, a fate I dreaded. His presence here was a deliberate move to intimidate me, to keep me in line. Suddenly, the phone rang again, and he cursed, stepping away toward the stairs. This was my chance. I crept forward, my knees protesting, and reached the outside door. As I twisted the knob, a shadow fell across the floor. My neighbor, Mr. Gable, stood there, peering in with a puzzled frown. "Eleanor? Everything all right?" he asked. I forced a smile and mumbled about looking for a misplaced recipe book. He nodded slowly, but his eyes lingered on the surgical tray behind me. When he left, I noticed the key was gone from my pocket. Panic clawed at my throat. The key was missing. Had I dropped it, or did someone take it? I retraced my steps silently, scanning the dim basement floor. My son's voice still drifted from upstairs, now raised in argument with someone. I had to find that key before he did. It was my only tangible lead, my only hope to expose him. Losing it meant I'd be trapped in his web of lies, branded incompetent forever. His control over this situation was absolute. He'd even changed the locks on my house last week, for my safety. Kneeling, I felt along the cold concrete, my fingers brushing against grit and dust. Then, under the edge of a cabinet, I found it. Not the key, but a folded slip of paper tucked into a crack. It was a receipt for medical supplies, dated yesterday, with my son's signature. My blood ran cold. He was still operating down here. A floorboard groaned above, and I froze. His footsteps descended the stairs, slower this time. I shoved the paper into my sleeve and stood, pretending to adjust a box. He stopped at the bottom, his eyes narrowing. "Mum, what are you doing down here?" he said, his tone too calm. Behind him, I saw the garden door was slightly ajar, and a patch of freshly turned earth was visible outside. I pointed a shaky finger toward the garden. "The roses need watering," I said, my voice wavering on purpose. He didn't buy it. His jaw tightened. "I'll handle it," he replied, stepping between me and the door. Now, I had to get a sample of that soil to prove what was buried there. But he was watching me like a hawk, his presence a wall I couldn't pass. Defying him was dangerous. He'd hinted before about accidents that happened to confused elders. His resources were vast. He had friends in high places, and no one would question him over me. I shuffled toward the stairs, playing the frail old woman, when the doorbell rang sharply. He hesitated, then went to answer it, locking the basement door behind him. I was trapped. My eyes darted around, landing on a loose floorboard near the wall. Prying it up with my fingers, I found a hidden compartment. Inside, a small notebook filled with dates, names, and amounts of money. My son's handwriting. One entry caught my eye. Patient 7. Complications. Disposal in garden. My hands trembled as I heard the lock click again. He was coming back, and this time he wasn't alone. I shoved the notebook into my dress pocket just as the door opened. My son entered with a woman in a crisp white uniform. A nurse from the facility, he introduced her. Just a routine check, he said smoothly. My mind raced. I had to get this evidence out of here. If they searched me, it was over. The nurse smiled, but her eyes were assessing, clinical. I needed to create a distraction, something to buy time. If I did nothing, I'd be carted off to a place where no one would believe me. My son was bearing down on me heavily. He'd orchestrated this visit to seal my fate. As the nurse stepped closer, I feigned a dizzy spell, stumbling against the surgical tray. Instruments clattered to the floor, and she rushed to steady me. In the chaos, I slipped the notebook under a loose tile I'd noticed earlier. But when I looked up, my son was staring directly at that spot, a faint smirk on his face. He knew I'd hidden something. The nurse helped me to a chair, her grip firm. "We should go now, Eleanor," she said. My son nodded, his eyes cold. "Don't worry, Mum. I'll take care of everything here." As they led me away, I glimpsed him kneeling by the tile, retrieving the notebook. The car drove away from my house. My son was driving, and the nurse sat next to me in the back. I watched my home disappear in the mirror. I felt a deep fear. I knew if I didn't act now, I might never see my house again. I had to get out before we reached the facility. If I failed, they would lock me away and say I was crazy. I would lose everything I loved. My son gripped the steering wheel hard. He had told me not to cause any trouble. The nurse held my arm tightly. I pretended to be weak and sleepy. Then a deer ran in front of the car. My son swerved and cursed. The nurse's grip loosened for just a second. I reached for the door handle. It was locked. My heart raced. My son said he was taking a shortcut on the old mill road. I knew that road was full of potholes. We passed Mr. Gable's truck near a diner. He was the only one who seemed to suspect something. When we turned onto the bumpy road, I fake coughed. The nurse leaned in to check on me. I saw my son's phone light up with a text. The name on the screen made me cold with dread. It was from the hospital chief, the man who helped cover up my son's mistakes. The car hit a big pothole, and the phone fell near my feet. My son grabbed it back fast, but I saw the first words. "Disposal site compromised. Need to move it tonight." He glared at me like he knew I saw it. The nurse held me tighter. I felt hopeless. Up ahead, I saw the tall gates of the facility. My son slowed down. A security guard stepped out, his hand near his hip. My son turned to me and whispered, "Don't try anything, Mom. They're expecting you." The facility doors closed behind me with a hiss. I was in a white, sterile hallway. I felt completely trapped. I had to find a way to call Mr. Gable. If I didn't, no one would ever believe my story. My son had left, but his influence was everywhere. The staff knew him by name. They took my purse and shoes and gave me a plain gown. I felt so humiliated. They led me to a small room with a barred window. The nurse told me to rest. When she left, I saw a wall phone in the hall. It was my only chance. I tried to step out, but an orderly blocked my way. He said, "Room rest, Eleanor." I went back inside, pretending to be calm, but I was panicking inside. Then, there was a commotion down the hall. Another resident had collapsed, and everyone rushed to help. This was my opportunity. I slipped out and dialed Mr. Gable's number from memory. My hands were shaking. The phone rang once, twice, and then someone answered. But it wasn't Mr. Gable. It was my son. His voice was cold. "I knew you'd try this, Mom. I had his line forwarded." My heart sank. He had outsmarted me. The orderly grabbed my arm and pulled me away. As he dragged me back, I saw a photo on the wall. It was the hospital chief, smiling with my son. The orderly locked me in my room. I watched him take the phone receiver, but then I noticed the photo was crooked. Behind it, a loose panel in the wall was slightly open. I waited until the hall was quiet. Then I pushed on the loose panel near the photo. It opened into a small space behind the wall. I felt a spark of hope. I planned to use this passage to escape or find proof against my son. If I failed, they would drug me more and take away my freedom. I knew my son had ordered extra watching on me. I crawled into the dark space. It was tight and dusty. I felt along the pipes. After a long time, I came out into a supply closet. I was nervous. I searched through a cabinet and found some files hidden behind boxes. I pulled one out. It was a patient record with a name from my son's notebook. I was shocked. As I read, I saw notes about post-operative complications and family notified of natural causes. I felt sick. He was using this place to hide his crimes. Suddenly, I heard footsteps. I hid behind a shelf and held my breath. 2 orderlies came in. One said, "The son wants us to watch the old lady. He's paying extra." They took some supplies and left. One of them dropped a keycard on the floor. I stayed hidden until it was quiet. Then I crept out and picked up the keycard. My heart was pounding. But when I turned to leave, I saw a shadow under the door. Someone was waiting outside. The keycard felt cool in my hand. It might be my way out. I wanted to get to the administrative office and find records to prove what my son did. If I succeeded, I could clear my name. If not, they would lock me up tighter. I knew my son was paying people to watch me. I waited until the shadow moved away. Then I slipped into the hall. I used the keycard to open a stairwell door. I climbed to the 2nd floor. The administrative office was dark, with computers glowing. I sat at a desk and tried to log in, but it needed a password. I was frustrated. Then I saw a sticky note on the monitor. It said, "Password, Robert 2023, my son's name and the year." I was surprised it was so easy. I logged in and found files about his surgeries and cover-ups. Then I saw a live camera feed from my garden. It showed fresh digging near my roses. My son was watching it. Just then, the door opened. The head nurse stood there. She said, "Eleanor, you shouldn't be here." 2 orderlies came in behind her. I stood up, ready to resist. She said, "Your son is on his way. He wants to handle this personally." As they took me out, I glanced back at the computer. The feed was still on. I saw a figure digging in my garden. Back in my room, the head nurse gave me a shot in my IV. She said it was to calm me. I felt so drowsy. I had to fight the drugs and warn someone about the garden before my son arrived. If I failed, He would destroy the evidence and make sure I never spoke again. I was terrified. I focused on the loose panel, but the sedative was making me fuzzy. Then I heard a tapping at my window. Mr. Gable was outside, looking in through the bars. He pointed toward the garden, but I couldn't understand him. I gestured for him to go, but he shook his head. He slipped a burner phone through the bars. I grabbed it and hid it under my pillow just as the door opened. My son came in. He looked serious. He said, "Mum, we need to talk." The nurse left, and he closed the door. He stepped closer and said, "I know you've been snooping. It ends now." He adjusted my IV bag. I felt the phone against my back. It gave me a little hope. Then he leaned in and whispered, "I moved the body, Mum. It's not in the garden anymore." I felt a cold dread. He smiled cruelly and said, "And now, neither are you." He pulled out a syringe filled with clear liquid. I tried to sit up, but I was too weak. His shadow fell over me as he raised the syringe. I knew I had only seconds to do something. I braced myself as my son raised the syringe, his eyes cold and determined. My mind raced. I had to distract him long enough to use the burner phone under my pillow. If he injected me, I'd lose consciousness and any chance of stopping him. The sedative from earlier already made my limbs heavy, but the fear sharpened my focus. He leaned closer, his breath hot on my face. "This will help you rest, Mom," he said, his voice a low threat. I feigned a coughing fit, twisting my body to reach under the pillow. My fingers brushed against the phone's cool plastic. He paused, syringe hovering, and glanced at the door as if expecting someone. That moment of hesitation was all I needed. I pressed the power button on the phone, hoping it was charged. The screen lit up silently, casting a faint glow. But then he noticed the light and snarled, grabbing my wrist. "What's that?" he demanded, pulling the phone from my grasp. My heart sank as he examined it. He chuckled darkly. "Mr. Gable's doing, I assume. Too bad he won't be able to help you." He dropped the phone and crushed it under his shoe, the crackle of breaking plastic echoing in the quiet room. Just as he turned back to me, a loud alarm blared from the hallway. A fire drill or something worse. He cursed, distracted, and stepped toward the door to check. In that chaos, I noticed the syringe had rolled under the bed. I slid off the mattress, my body aching, and reached for it. My hand closed around the cool cylinder as the door swung open. The head nurse stood there, her eyes wide. "We have a situation?" she said to my son. "The police are here?" He froze, then glared at me. "What did you do?" he whispered. I clutched the syringe behind my back, my pulse pounding. The nurse added, "They're asking about a body found on your property." My son's face went pale. He backed away, but his eyes locked on mine, promising retribution. As he followed her out, I stayed on the floor, the syringe hidden in my hand. I knew he'd be back, and next time, he wouldn't hesitate. The alarm continued to blare, and I could hear voices and footsteps in the hall. I had to get out of this room now, while the chaos provided cover. I had to reach the police and show them the syringe as evidence of my son's intent. If I failed, he might silence me permanently. If I did nothing, I'd be labeled a crazy old woman while he walked free. I crawled to the door and peered out. Orderlies were hurrying patients toward exits, their attention divided. My son was nowhere in sight, but I knew he'd be dealing with the police, buying me precious minutes. I slipped into the stream of people, keeping my head down. The syringe felt slippery in my sweaty palm. As we moved down the hallway, I spotted a familiar face, Mr. Gable, talking urgently with an officer near the main entrance. My heart leaped. I needed to get to him. But then an orderly gripped my arm, guiding me toward a side exit. "This way, Eleanor," he said firmly. I resisted, pointing toward Mr. Gable. "I know him," I insisted, but the orderly shook his head. "Everyone stays together." We were herded into a courtyard, the cold night air biting through my gown. I shivered, scanning the crowd for Mr. Gable. Suddenly, a hand clamped over my mouth from behind, and I was pulled into a shadowy corner. My son's voice hissed in my ear. "You shouldn't have involved the police, Mom." He wrestled the syringe from my hand and pressed it against my neck. "Now you're coming with me." I struggled, but he was too strong. Just then, a flashlight beam swept over us, and an officer called out, "Is everything all right here?" My son released me instantly, smiling warmly. "Just helping my mother, officer," he said. The officer nodded, but his eyes lingered on me. As he turned away, my son whispered, "We're not done yet." He guided me toward a secluded van parked nearby, its engine running. I knew if I got in, I might never come out. The van door slid open, and my son pushed me inside. The interior was dark and smelled of damp earth. I had to escape before he drove away. I had to create a disturbance that would draw the police back. If I didn't, he'd take me somewhere isolated, and no one would find me. If I failed, I'd die, or worse, be buried like his other victims. He climbed into the driver's seat, his knuckles white on the wheel. "You've caused enough trouble," he muttered, starting the engine. I fumbled in the dark, feeling for anything to use as a weapon. My hand brushed against a loose metal panel in the side door. I pried at it, my fingers aching. Outside, I could see the police still milling around, but they were distracted. My son glanced in the rearview mirror, his eyes narrowing. "Sit still, Mom," he warned. I ignored him, working the panel until it came free, a sharp, jagged piece of metal. As he pulled out of the parking lot, I slammed it against the window, but it didn't break. He laughed coldly. "Tempered glass," he said. "You're wasting your time." But then the van hit a pothole, jolting us both. The syringe he'd taken from me rolled out from under the seat and landed near my feet. I grabbed it, my heart racing. He saw me in the mirror and swore, swerving the van. "Drop it!" he shouted. I held it tight, aiming for the door lock. Just as I was about to strike, headlights flashed behind us, a car following closely. My son accelerated, but the car matched his speed. I recognized Mr. Gable's truck. Hope surged through me. My son cursed again and took a sharp turn into an alley, trying to lose them. The van screeched to a halt behind a dumpster. He turned to me, his face twisted in rage. "This ends now," he said, unbuckling his seatbelt. But before he could move, the passenger door was wrenched open. Mr. Gable stood there, a tire iron in his hand. "Let her go, Robert," he demanded. My son laughed, pulling a small knife from his pocket. "You're too late," he said. I gripped the syringe tighter, ready to fight back. The alley was dark, and I could hear sirens in the distance. Mr. Gable stepped forward, but my son lunged at him. In the struggle, the syringe fell and shattered on the pavement. I was trapped in the van, watching the two men grapple. Then, my son kicked Mr. Gable back and slammed the door shut, locking it from the outside. The engine roared to life again. I was alone, and he was driving faster now, deeper into the night. The van sped through deserted streets, the world outside a blur of darkness. I had to find a way out before my son reached his destination. I had to disable the van or attract attention. If I failed, he'd hide me away where no one could find me. If I failed, I'd lose my life, and the truth would die with me. I crawled to the back, searching for anything useful. The floor was littered with tools and debris, a leftover from whatever he used this van for. My hands closed around a heavy wrench. I could try to break the windows again, but they were reinforced. My son drove erratically, taking turns too fast, and I heard him on the phone, barking orders. "Meet me at the old warehouse," he said. "I have a package to dispose of." My blood ran cold. I had to act now. I swung the wrench at the rear door lock, but it only dented the metal. The noise made him glance back, and he shouted, "Stop that!" He hit the brakes hard, sending me sliding forward. I landed near the front seats, and my hand brushed against the gear shift. An idea formed. If I could shift it into neutral, maybe the van would stall. I reached for it, but he saw me and slapped my hand away. "Don't even think about it," he snarled. We were on a highway now, lights from other cars flashing by. I noticed a police cruiser ahead, its lights off, but moving steadily. I pounded on the window, screaming for help, but the sound was muffled. My son laughed. "No one can hear you," he said. Then, the police cruiser suddenly turned on its sirens and sped up, pulling alongside us. My son's smile vanished. He swerved, trying to lose them, but the cruiser matched his moves. An officer gestured for him to pull over. My son ignored it, accelerating instead. The cruiser fell back briefly, then reappeared with backup, another car joining the pursuit. My son cursed, his knuckles white. He took a sharp exit into an industrial area, the van bouncing over rough roads. As he slowed to navigate a tight corner, I saw my chance. I grabbed the wrench and smashed it against the side window repeatedly. This time, a crack appeared. My son yelled, but I kept hitting it. The window splintered, and cold air rushed in. I shouted for help, my voice raw. The police cars were close behind, their sirens wailing. My son slammed on the brakes, and the van skidded to a stop in front of a chain-link fence. He turned to me, his eyes wild. "You've ruined everything," he hissed. He reached for something under his seat, a gun. The police doors opened, officers aiming their weapons. "Step out of the vehicle," one commanded. My son hesitated, then raised his hands slowly. But as he did, he glanced at me and mouthed, "I'll finish this." An officer approached, but my son suddenly ducked and rolled out of the van, disappearing into the shadows of the warehouses. The officers gave chase, leaving me alone in the broken van. I clutched the wrench, my body trembling. The night was silent, except for the distant shouts. Then I heard a soft click from the back of the van. The rear door swung open, and a figure stepped inside. It was the hospital chief, holding a flashlight. "Eleanor," he said calmly, "we need to talk." The hospital chief stood in the van, his face illuminated by the flashlight. He looked calm, but his eyes were hard. I had to keep him talking until the police returned, or find a way to escape. I had to expose his role in my son's crimes. If I failed, he'd silence me and make it look like an accident. If I failed, I'd not only die, but justice for all the victims would be lost. I tightened my grip on the wrench, still in my hand. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice steady despite my fear. He smiled thinly. "To clean up this mess. Your son is impulsive, but I'm here to ensure things are handled properly." He stepped closer, and I noticed he held a syringe similar to the one my son had. "You've seen too much," he said. I backed toward the broken window, but he blocked my path. "The police are right outside," I warned. He chuckled. "They're chasing your son. By the time they return, you'll be gone." I knew I had to act fast. I swung the wrench at him, but he dodged easily and grabbed my wrist, forcing me to drop it. Don't make this difficult, he said, pressing the syringe to my arm. I struggled, kicking and scratching, but he was stronger. Just then, a shadow moved outside the van, Mr. Gable, creeping up silently. He lunged at the chief, tackling him to the floor. The syringe clattered away, and the two men wrestled in the confined space. I scrambled to find the syringe, my hands shaking. The chief pinned Mr. Gable down, reaching for his throat. "You shouldn't have gotten involved," he grunted. I found the syringe and crawled toward them. As the chief raised a hand to strike Mr. Gable, I plunged the needle into his neck and pushed the plunger. He gasped, his eyes widening in shock, then slumped over. Mr. Gable pushed him off, breathing heavily. "Are you okay?" he asked me. I nodded, my heart pounding. We heard shouts approaching, the police returning. But as we stepped out of the van, I saw my son being handcuffed by officers. He glared at me, his face a mask of hatred. "This isn't over," he spat. An officer helped me to a squad car, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. Mr. Gable explained everything to the police, showing them the evidence he'd collected. I felt a wave of relief, but it was short-lived. As they led my son away, he turned and shouted, "You think you've won? I have backups, Mum. People who owe me." The officer assured me I was safe, but I couldn't shake the chill his words left. We drove to the station, the lights of the city flashing by. When we arrived, a detective sat me down for a statement. I told them everything, from the basement surgeries to the garden. He listened intently, taking notes. After hours of questioning, they finally let me go home with Mr. Gable. But as we pulled up to my house, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The garden was torn up, and a figure stood near my porch, watching us. It was too dark to see who it was, but they moved quickly into the shadows. Mr. Gable didn't notice, already getting out to help me. I stayed in the car, my hands trembling. Whoever it was, they knew I was back, and they weren't happy. The figure in my garden vanished into the shadows as Mr. Gable opened my car door. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had to identify who was lurking on my property and why before they could strike. If I failed, they might silence me for good, undoing all the progress I'd made. Mr. Gable hadn't seen them, his attention on helping me inside. I gripped his arm, pointing toward the garden. "Someone was there," I whispered. He tensed, his eyes scanning the darkness. "Stay here," he said, moving toward the porch. But I couldn't just wait. I needed to see for myself. If I let fear paralyze me, I'd never feel safe in my own home again. The police had left, believing the threat was neutralized with my son's arrest. But his warning about backups echoed in my mind. As Mr. Gable crept forward, a sudden rustling came from the rose bushes. He froze, flashlight beam darting. Then a cat darted out, meowing loudly. I sighed in relief, but the tension didn't ease. We went inside, locking the doors. Mr. Gable insisted on staying the night to keep watch. I agreed, too shaken to argue. In the kitchen, I made tea, my hands trembling. That's when I noticed the back door was slightly ajar. I always lock it. Mr. Gable checked it, frowning. "It was locked when we left," he said. We searched the house room by room, finding nothing out of place until we reached the basement. The door was open, a cold draft wafting up. I never went down there anymore, the memories too painful. Mr. Gable descended first, me following with a flashlight. The surgical area was clean, too clean, as if someone had scrubbed it recently. On the metal tray, a single item gleamed, a scalpel, placed neatly where my son used to leave his tools. It wasn't there before. My blood ran cold. Mr. Gable picked it up, his face grim. "Someone's been here," he said. Just then, the lights flickered and went out. We were plunged into darkness. I heard a soft click from upstairs, the front door opening. Mr. Gable shoved me behind him, scalpel in hand. Footsteps creaked on the floor above, slow and deliberate. A voice called out, "Eleanor? I know you're home." It was a woman's voice, unfamiliar and cold. I held my breath, recognizing the tone. It was the nurse from the facility, the one who helped my son. She was here, and she wasn't alone. The nurse's voice echoed through the dark house, sending chills down my spine. I had to confront her and find out what she wanted before she could harm us or destroy any remaining evidence. If I failed, she might succeed where my son had not, and I'd lose my chance at peace. Mr. Gable tightened his grip on the scalpel, his breathing shallow. We crouched in the basement, listening as her footsteps moved toward the stairs. "I just want to talk, Eleanor," she said, her tone deceptively sweet. I knew better. She was part of this, and she had resources I couldn't fathom. My son's network was still active, and she was proof. Mr. Gable gestured for me to stay put while he edged toward the stairwell. But I couldn't let him face this alone. I followed, my old bones protesting. As we reached the top step, a beam of light swept the hallway from a flashlight she carried. She stood near the kitchen, her uniform crisp, a smirk on her face. "Your son sent me," she said. "He has a message for you." I stepped forward, my voice steady. "What message?" She laughed softly. "That you should drop this. Or else." Mr. Gable moved to block her path, but she raised her hands innocently. "I'm unarmed. I'm here as a friend." Suddenly, a car pulled into the driveway, headlights flooding the front windows. The nurse's smile vanished. "The police?" she muttered, confused. Mr. Gable glanced out and shook his head. "It's a black sedan, unmarked." Two men in suits got out, approaching the house. The nurse backed away, her confidence faltering. "They're early," she whispered, more to herself. I didn't know who they were, but they weren't police. The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. Mr. Gable kept the scalpel hidden, but ready. The nurse suddenly bolted toward the back door, but one of the men from outside stepped in, blocking her exit. He held up a badge. "FBI," he said. "We need to speak with Eleanor about her son's activities." My mind reeled. Why were federal agents here? The nurse froze, her face pale. The agent looked at her. "You're under arrest for aiding and abetting." As he cuffed her, she glared at me. "This isn't over," she spat. The other agent turned to me. "Ma'am, we have questions about your son's connections to a larger ring." But before he could continue, his radio crackled with a report. "Subject, Robert, has escaped custody." The agent's eyes widened. My son was free, and he was coming for me. The FBI agent's words hung in the air. My son was free. I had to work with them to track him down before he could retaliate. If I didn't, he'd disappear, or worse, come after me with nothing to lose. If I failed, I would lose my life, and so would anyone who helped me. The agents secured the house, questioning me about my son's associates and the basement surgeries. Mr. Gable provided the scalpel as evidence, and they bagged it carefully. I felt a sliver of hope with the FBI involved, but the pressure was immense. My son had allies in high places, and his escape proved it. As I recounted everything, one agent took notes while the other searched the garden. Suddenly he called us outside. "We found something," he said, pointing to a freshly dug patch near the roses. Using shovels from their car, they unearthed a metal box buried shallowly. It was locked. But one agent pried it open with a tool. Inside, we found documents, patient records, financial transactions, and a list of names with amounts next to them. My son's handwriting was all over it. One name stood out, a high-ranking hospital administrator I'd never met. The agent whistled. "This implicates several powerful people," he said. Just then, Mr. Gable's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Tell my mum I'm watching." He showed it to me, and my blood ran cold. The agents immediately traced it, but it was a burner phone. They increased security around the house, posting a guard outside. I felt trapped, even with protection. Later that night, as I tried to sleep, I heard a noise from the garden. Peeking through the window, I saw a shadow moving near the fence. The guard was nowhere in sight. I woke Mr. Gable, and we alerted the agents. They rushed out, but the shadow was gone. On the fence, a note was pinned. "You can't hide forever." It was written in my son's hand. The agents intensified their search, but I knew he was close. The next morning, the phone rang. I answered, and a distorted voice said, "I have something of yours." The line went dead. Minutes later, a package was delivered. No return address. Inside was a locket I'd lost years ago, with a photo of me and my son inside. It was a message. He knew my secrets, and he was playing mind games. The agents took it for evidence, but I felt violated. That evening, as I sat in the living room, the TV news reported a break-in at the evidence locker where my son's items were stored. Key pieces were missing. The agent in charge looked grim. "He's cleaning house," he said. I realized then that my son wasn't just fleeing, he was erasing his tracks, and I was next on his list. The doorbell rang, and through the peephole I saw a delivery man with flowers. But when the agent opened the door, the man shoved an envelope into his hands and ran. Inside the envelope was a single key and an address scribbled on paper, the location of my son's new hiding place. It was a trap, I was sure, but we had to act. As we prepared to leave, I noticed the flowers were my favorite, something only my son would know. He was taunting me, drawing me in. The agents decided to raid the address, and I insisted on going. I needed to face him. But as we drove away, I glanced back at my house. The garden gate was swinging open, though no one was there. Someone had been inside again, and they'd left something behind. A single rose on my porch, its stem broken. It was a symbol of everything he'd destroyed, and a promise of more to come. The agents drove toward the address on the paper, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. I sat in the back, my mind racing. I had to confront my son and end this, once and for all. If I failed, he'd vanish or kill me, and the truth would die with us. The consequences were unimaginable, not just my life, but the justice owed to his victims. The FBI had teams surrounding the area, but I knew my son was clever. He'd anticipate this. The pressure was mounting. His escapes and threats showed he had help, perhaps from the names on that list. As we approached, the warehouse loomed dark and silent. Agents moved in, weapons drawn, while Mr. Gable and I waited in a secured vehicle nearby. Through the radio, we heard updates. No signs of movement inside. Then, a shot rang out, and chaos erupted. Agents rushed in, and we heard shouting. Minutes later, one agent returned, his face grave. "He's not here," he said. "It was a decoy. We found a recording device playing sounds." My heart sank. He'd led us on a wild goose chase. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from my son. "Nice try, Mom. Check your garden." I froze, realizing he'd diverted us to get back to my house. We sped back, sirens wailing. When we arrived, The garden was torn up again, and the back door was forced open. Inside, the house was ransacked, drawers emptied, furniture overturned. In the basement, the surgical area was destroyed, tools scattered everywhere. On the wall, written in red paint, were the words, "I'm still here." Mr. Gable found me trembling and helped me sit. The agents searched for clues, but my son was gone. As they worked, one agent discovered a hidden camera in the living room. It had been recording us. He removed it, but the damage was done. My son had been watching, learning our moves. I felt violated, my sanctuary invaded. Later, the FBI traced the camera to a tech store downtown, but the buyer used a fake ID. They increased surveillance on my house, but I knew it wasn't enough. That night, I couldn't sleep, so I sat by the window, watching the garden. A figure appeared briefly near the fence. It was my son, smirking before melting into the shadows. I alerted the agents, but they found nothing. The next morning, a package arrived with no postmark. It had been hand-delivered. Inside was a USB drive. When we plugged it in, it showed footage from the basement camera, me discovering the surgeries, my son's face clear as he operated. It was evidence, but it felt like a confession. Then, the video cut to a live feed, my son, in a dim room, speaking directly to the camera. "Hello, Mum," he said. "If you're watching this, I'm already far away, but I left you a gift." The screen went black. The agents frantically tried to trace the signal, but it was encrypted. An hour later, they received an anonymous tip. A body had been found in a nearby river, identified as one of the names from the list. My son was tying up loose ends, and I was the only one left who could stop him. But as I stood there, I realized the USB drive had a tracking device embedded in it. The agents disabled it, but the message was clear. He knew where I was, and he was coming. The phone rang, and I answered. It was my son, his voice calm. "I'm done playing, Mum. It's time to finish this." He gave me an address, a remote cabin in the woods, and said, "Come alone, or Mr. Gable dies." I looked at Mr. Gable, who was talking with an agent. My son had taken him hostage somehow. The line went dead. I had to go, but I knew it was a trap. As I prepared to leave, I slipped a small knife into my pocket. The agents argued against it, but I insisted. I couldn't let anyone else get hurt. We devised a plan. They'd follow discreetly, but I had to act alone first. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. My house grew smaller, and I wondered if I'd ever see it again. The road ahead was dark, and I knew my son was waiting. But just as I turned onto the highway, a car pulled out behind me, its headlights off. It wasn't the FBI. It was someone else, following me. I accelerated, but the car matched my speed. My son wasn't at the cabin. He was here, on the road, and he had help. I gripped the wheel tighter, my knuckles white. The car behind me flashed its lights once, twice, then sped up, ramming my bumper. I swerved, fighting to control the car. In the darkness, I saw the driver's face. It was the hospital chief, who I thought was arrested. He was free, and he was working with my son. They boxed me in, forcing me toward the shoulder. I had no choice but to stop. As I did, both cars parked, and men got out, my son and the chief, armed and determined. They approached my car, and my son tapped on the window. "Get out, Mom," he said. "We have a lot to discuss." I locked the doors, but he smashed the window with a bat. Glass shattered around me, and I screamed. The chief grabbed my arm, pulling me out. My son smiled coldly. "You shouldn't have involved the FBI," he said. As they dragged me toward their car, I saw Mr. Gable's truck speeding toward us in the distance. He was coming, but would he be in time? My son shoved me into the back seat, and the chief got in the driver's seat. We sped away, leaving Mr. Gable behind. I was captive again, and this time there were no police to save me. My son turned to me, his eyes empty. "It's just us now, Mum," he said, "and this ends how I want it to." I closed my eyes, praying for a miracle, but all I heard was the engine roaring as we drove deeper into the night, toward an unknown fate. The car sped through winding roads, my son and the chief in the front, me tied up in the back. I had to find a way to escape or signal for help before they reached their destination. If I failed, they'd kill me and dispose of my body where no one would find it. If I failed, I would die, and there would be no chance for justice. My son drove recklessly, while the chief monitored the radio for police chatter. They thought they were safe, but I knew Mr. Gable was following. I'd seen him in the mirror before we lost him. The pressure was intense. These men were desperate, and they had nothing left to lose. As we climbed into the hills, the chief spoke into a phone. "The package is secured," he said. "Meet us at the spot." I didn't know who he was talking to, but it meant more people were involved. I struggled against the ropes, but they were tight. My son glanced back, sneering. "Don't bother, Mum. It's over." But then, the car hit a pothole, jolting us all. My son cursed, and the chief dropped his phone. It slid toward me, and I managed to kick it under the seat. They didn't notice, too focused on the road. This was my chance. If I could reach it, I could call for help. I shifted slowly, trying to hook it with my foot. The chief turned up the radio, masking my movements. After a few minutes, I felt the phone under my shoe. I nudged it closer, but my hands were tied. I needed to create a distraction. I fake coughed violently, drawing their attention. "What's wrong with her?" the chief asked. My son shrugged. "She's always been dramatic." As they argued, I used the moment to slide the phone into my lap. With difficulty, I pressed the power button. It was on, but I couldn't dial with my hands bound. The car slowed, and my son pulled over at a lookout point. "We're waiting here," he said. They got out to smoke, leaving me alone for a moment. I worked frantically, using my teeth to try and unlock the phone. It was slow going, and I heard them talking outside. "Once she's gone, we're in the clear," the chief said. My son replied, "I should have done this years ago." My heart ached at his words. Just then, headlights appeared on the road below, Mr. Gable's truck, approaching fast. My son saw it and shouted, "He found us!" They jumped back into the car, and my son sped off, tires screeching. I had almost unlocked the phone, but in the chaos, it fell to the floor. The chief reached back and grabbed it. "Nice try," he said, pocketing it. We drove deeper into the forest, the road becoming rougher. After a while, we stopped at a secluded cabin. They dragged me inside, tying me to a chair. The place was sparse, with a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. My son paced, while the chief checked his weapons. "Now we wait," my son said. "For what?" I asked. He smiled. "For the others? They're bringing the equipment." I realized he meant surgical tools. He planned to operate on me, to make it look like an accident. I felt a surge of terror. But then, a noise outside, a twig snapping. My son and the chief froze, listening. "Animals," the chief said, but he looked nervous. I heard it again, closer this time. My son peered out the window. "I don't see anything." Suddenly, the door burst open, and Mr. Gable charged in, wielding a tire iron. He swung at the chief, knocking him down. My son pulled a knife, advancing on Mr. Gable. They struggled, and I tried to free myself. The ropes were tight, but I worked at them. Mr. Gable gained the upper hand, pinning my son. "It's over, Robert," he said. But then more men entered. Two strangers I didn't recognize, armed with guns. They pointed them at Mr. Gable. "Let him go," one said. Mr. Gable hesitated, then released my son. My son stood, brushing himself off. "I told you I had backups," he said to me. They tied Mr. Gable up next to me. My son approached, knife in hand. "I'm sorry it came to this, Mum," he said. But as he raised the knife, a shot rang out from outside. The window shattered, and one of the strangers fell. FBI agents swarmed the cabin, shouting orders. In the confusion, my son grabbed me as a shield, holding the knife to my throat. "Back off, or she dies," he yelled. The agents halted, weapons aimed. My son backed toward a rear door, dragging me with him. "We're leaving," he whispered to me. But as he reached for the door, I stomped on his foot hard. He yelped, loosening his grip. I broke free and shoved him away. He stumbled, and the chief, who was still on the floor, lunged at me. Mr. Gable kicked out, tripping him. My son regained his balance and made for the door, but an agent tackled him. They wrestled, and my son's knife clattered away. He was subdued and cuffed. The chief and the others were arrested too. I untied Mr. Gable, and we embraced, both shaking. The agent in charge approached. "It's over," he said. "We have them all." But as they led my son away, he looked back at me, his eyes filled with hate. "This isn't the end, Mom," he said. "I'll find a way." I knew he meant it. Later, at the station, they debriefed us. The network was broken and the evidence was secure. But as I returned home, I felt empty. The garden was ruined, my house violated. Mr. Gable stayed with me again, and we sat in silence. The next day, I received a letter from the court. My son was being transferred to a maximum security prison. It should have brought relief, but it didn't. That night, I dreamed of the basement, of the surgeries, of the lives lost. I woke up sweating and went to the garden. The moon was bright, and I started digging, not sure what I was looking for. My hands were dirty, my back aching. But I kept going. Then I found it. A small metal box buried deep. Inside was a journal my son had kept, detailing everything from the beginning. It was his confession, in his own words. I sat there, under the stars, and cried. For him, for me, for all of it. The journal was the closure I needed, but it also opened old wounds. I knew I'd never be the same, but I was free. As I stood to go inside, I saw a single rose blooming amid the wreckage, a sign of resilience. I picked it and placed it on the porch. Tomorrow I'd start rebuilding, but for now, I just wanted to sleep. But as I turned, I heard a soft whisper from the shadows, my son's voice, faint and distant. "I'm still here, Mom." I shook my head, blaming it on the wind, but the feeling lingered, a ghost in my garden, and I knew that some wounds never fully heal. The journal in my hands felt heavy with my son's sins. I sat at my kitchen table, the morning light filtering through the curtains, and I knew I had to turn it over to the FBI to ensure he never walked free again. If I hesitated, his network might find a way to destroy it, or silence me first. Mr. Gable had gone home to rest, and the house was too quiet, every creak making me jump. I made coffee, my hands shaking as I poured, and decided to scan the journal pages for any hidden clues before handing it in. If I failed, I'd live in eternal fear. I'd never sleep soundly, always waiting for another shadow in the garden. My son's influence lingered. His allies were still out there, and I'd received a cryptic email last night from an unknown sender. Some secrets should stay buried. As I flipped through the journal, I found a section detailing payments to a judge, someone high up who helped cover his tracks. My blood ran cold. This was bigger than I thought. Just then, the doorbell rang, startling me. I hid the journal under a stack of mail and peered through the peephole. A woman in a business suit stood there, holding a briefcase. "Eleanor, I'm from the district attorney's office," she said. I opened the door cautiously, but as she stepped in, her eyes darted around too keenly. She claimed she needed my statement for the trial, but when I asked for ID, she fumbled in her purse. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. A text from Mr. Gable. "DA's office says no one was sent to you. Be careful." I froze, and the woman noticed. She dropped the briefcase, and a syringe rolled out. I backed away, but she lunged at me. I grabbed a heavy vase from the table and swung it, hitting her shoulder. She cursed and fled out the door. I locked it, my heart pounding. On the floor, her briefcase had popped open, revealing not documents, but a listening device and photos of me from recent days. They were still watching. I picked up the journal, realizing it was more dangerous than I imagined. But as I called the FBI, I noticed a tiny slip of paper tucked in the binding, a phone number with an area code I recognized from my son's past. I dialed it, and a man answered on the first ring. "I've been waiting for your call," he said, his voice familiar. It was the hospital chief, who I thought was in custody. He was free, and he knew I had the journal. "We need to talk, Eleanor," he said, "or more people will get hurt." The line went dead, and I stood there, the journal burning in my hands. Outside, a car engine started, and I saw a black sedan idling across the street. They had found me, and this time, they weren't hiding. The black sedan sat there, engine running, a silent threat. I had to get the journal to the FBI safely before the chief or his men could intercept it. If I failed, they'd destroy the evidence and eliminate me, wiping the slate clean. I called the agent handling my case, but it went to voicemail. Leaving a message felt useless. They could be monitoring my phone. I needed to move now. If I did nothing, it would cost me my life, and the truth would die with me. My son's network was pressing hard. That sedan was a reminder they had resources I couldn't match. I grabbed the journal and my keys, planning to drive to the FBI field office downtown. But as I opened the garage door, I saw the tires on my car were slashed, all four flat. They had sabotaged me while I was inside. Panic rose, but I forced it down. I'd have to walk to the bus stop a few blocks away. I stuffed the journal into a grocery bag and headed out the back, through the garden. The rose bushes were overgrown, a mess from all the digging, and I felt a pang of sadness for what my home had become. As I reached the alley, a man stepped out from behind a fence, one of the strangers from the cabin, his face grim. "Give me the book," he demanded, holding a knife. I turned to run, but he grabbed my arm. Suddenly, a car horn blared, and Mr. Gable's truck screeched to a halt nearby. He jumped out, yelling, "Let her go!" The man released me and fled. Mr. Gable rushed over, breathless. "I saw the sedan and came right over," he said. We got into his truck and sped away. I explained about the journal and the chief. Mr. Gable nodded, his jaw set. "We'll go to the FBI together," he said. But as we drove, I noticed he was taking a different route, avoiding main roads. "Shortcut," he muttered. Then his phone rang, and he answered on speaker. It was the agent, saying they'd arrested the chief hours ago. "He couldn't have called you," the agent said. I looked at Mr. Gable, confused. He avoided my eyes. I must have misheard, I said, but doubt crept in. Why had he taken this route? The truck slowed near an abandoned warehouse, and Mr. Gable parked. "We need to talk, Eleanor," he said, his voice low. He reached under his seat and pulled out a gun. "I'm sorry, but your son pays better." My heart stopped. He was one of them. He gestured for me to get out, and I did, the journal still in my hand. As we stood in the empty lot, I saw the black sedan pulling in behind us. Mr. Gable smiled sadly. "It's nothing personal," he said. But then, a police siren wailed in the distance, growing closer. Mr. Gable tensed, looking around. I took a step back, clutching the journal. "They're coming," I said. He hesitated, and in that moment, I threw the journal into a storm drain nearby. It clattered down into the darkness. His face twisted in anger. "You idiot!" he shouted. The police cars arrived, surrounding us. Agents jumped out, aiming weapons. Mr. Gable raised his hands, dropping the gun. An agent approached me. "We tracked your phone. We knew something was wrong," he said. As they cuffed Mr. Gable, I stared at him, betrayed, but he leaned close and whispered, "Your son has a plan B. You'll never be safe." The agents led him away, and I stood there, shaken. The journal was gone, but I had scanned some pages earlier. Maybe it was enough. As I got into a police car, I looked back at the drain. Something glinted in the sunlight. A metal box, half hidden in the grass. It wasn't there before. I pointed it out to an agent who retrieved it. Inside was a USB drive labeled backup. My son had duplicates, and Mr. Gable had been hiding them. The agent plugged it into a laptop, and files popped up. More evidence, more names. But then, a message flashed on the screen. "Too late, Mum. The game has just begun." I felt a chill. My son was still pulling strings, even from prison. The agent closed the laptop, his face serious. "We need to move you to a safe house," he said. As we drove away, I watched my neighborhood fade from view. I didn't know if I'd ever return, or if I'd survive what came next. The safe house was a small apartment in a nondescript building, with agents stationed outside. I had to piece together what remained of the evidence and protect myself from my son's endless schemes. If I failed, his network would eventually find me, and I'd end up like his other victims, forgotten and buried. I was losing my sanity. Every noise made me flinch, and I trusted no one. The FBI provided me with copies of the journal scans, and I spent hours reviewing them, looking for patterns. My son was relentless. Even from prison, he had allies acting on his behalf. An agent brought me a tablet to communicate securely, but I found a hidden app installed, a tracking program. They removed it, but it showed how deep his reach went. As I worked, I discovered a reference to a Project Phoenix in the journal, with dates and locations I didn't recognize. It seemed like a contingency plan he set up years ago. I mentioned it to the agent in charge, who promised to investigate. Days passed, and I felt isolated, the walls closing in. Then, one evening, the power went out in the apartment. The agents checked the building, but it was a citywide blackout. They gave me a flashlight and told me to stay put. I sat in the dark, the silence oppressive. Suddenly, my tablet lit up, a video call from an unknown number. I answered, and my son's face appeared, smirking. He was in his prison cell, but he looked calm. "Hello, Mum," he said. "Missing home?" I didn't respond, my throat tight. "Project Phoenix is active," he continued. "You should have taken the deal when you had the chance." Then, the video cut to live footage of my house, flames engulfing the garden and basement. I gasped. "A little cleanup," he said. The call ended, and I screamed for the agents. They rushed in, and I showed them the video. They contacted local fire departments, but it was too late. My house was burning. I collapsed into a chair, tears streaming. My home, my memories, all gone. The agent tried to comfort me, but I felt hollow. Later, they confirmed it was arson, and my son had paid an inmate to make the call using a smuggled phone. He was still in control. The next morning, the agent brought me news. They'd traced Project Phoenix to an offshore account linked to the hospital chief, with funds meant for bribes and escapes. But as we talked, a package was delivered to the safe house, a box with no return address. Inside was a charred rose from my garden, and a note, "Some things can't be buried." It was my son's handwriting. The agents swept the area, but found no one. I realized then that he had people on the outside, loyal to him. That night, I couldn't sleep, so I reviewed the journal scans again. In the margins, I noticed tiny symbols, a code I remembered from his childhood. After hours of work, I deciphered it. Coordinates to a storage unit across town. I told the agents, and they agreed to check it out. We drove there at dawn, the streets empty. The storage unit was locked, but the agents cut the bolt. Inside, we found medical equipment, files, and a computer. When they booted it up, it showed a live feed of my son's prison cell. He was watching us, smiling. He typed a message on the screen. "I told you I'd always be here." Then, the computer shut down, and the unit's alarm blared. We rushed out, but as we did, I saw a figure watching from a distance. A woman in a nurse's uniform, the same one from the facility. She waved slowly before disappearing into the shadows. The agents gave chase, but she was gone. Back at the safe house, I felt more trapped than ever. My son had anticipated every move, and I was just playing his game. But as I lay down, I remembered something from the journal. A mention of a safe deposit box under my name, something he couldn't access. I hadn't thought about it in years. Maybe there was something there he wanted. I told the agents, and they arranged to visit the bank the next day. But that night, I heard a soft tapping at my window. I looked out and saw my son's face reflected in the glass, staring back at me. I blinked, and it was gone. Was it a dream? Or was he really there? I didn't know anymore. The bank vault felt cold and sterile as the agent and I approached the safe deposit box. I had to see what my son had hidden there, hoping it would finally break his hold over me. If I failed, he'd continue his games from prison, and I'd never know peace. My hope was dwindling. Each discovery seemed to lead to more traps. My son's network was still active. The nurse's appearance proved he had loyal followers. The agent used the key I provided, and the box slid open. Inside, we found old photos of me and my son, a stack of letters, and a small, locked diary. I recognized the diary. It was mine from years ago, when I first suspected his dark tendencies. I'd hidden it here for safekeeping. As I flipped through it, I found entries detailing his early experiments on animals and his cold demeanor. But tucked in the back was a sealed envelope addressed to me in my son's handwriting. The agent suggested opening it later, but I needed to know now. I tore it open. It was a confession, written before his arrest, admitting to the surgeries and the cover-ups, but also revealing something shocking. He had a child, a daughter he'd hidden away to protect her from his life. She was living under a different name, and he begged me to find her and keep her safe. My hands trembled. A granddaughter I never knew existed. The agent read it over my shoulder, his expression grim. "This changes things," he said. "If she's in danger, we need to find her." We left the bank, the diary and letters in an evidence bag. Back at the safe house, I couldn't stop thinking about her. My son's tactics were now personal. He'd used his own child as a pawn. The FBI started searching for her based on the clues in the letter, a birth certificate name and a city. Hours passed, and I felt a mix of anger and pity. Why tell me now? Was it another manipulation? That evening, the agent returned with news. They'd located her in a small town a few hours away. She was a teenager, living with a foster family. They wanted me to come with them to meet her, to see if she knew anything. I agreed, my heart heavy. The drive was quiet, the countryside rolling by. When we arrived, the foster mother greeted us warmly, but the girl, Lena, was hesitant. She had my son's eyes, and it hurt to look at her. We sat in the living room, and I explained who I was. She listened silently, then said, "He visited me sometimes. He told me stories about you." She went to her room and brought back a box of drawings, sketches of my house, the garden, even the basement. My blood ran cold. She knew details she shouldn't. "He said you were sick," she added, "that I might have to help you one day." I realized my son had been grooming her, perhaps to continue his work. The agent asked if she had any recent contact, and she shook her head. But as we prepared to leave, she handed me a note. "He gave me this last time," she said. It was a keycard to a laboratory downtown with an address scribbled on the back. The agent took it, promising to investigate. As we drove away, I looked back at the house. Lena stood on the porch, watching us, her expression unreadable. I wondered if she was a victim or a player in his schemes. Back at the safe house, the agent ran the keycard. It belonged to a private research facility linked to the hospital chief. They planned a raid for the next day. That night, I dreamed of Lena, her face merging with my son's. I woke up sweating and went to the window. The street was quiet, but I saw a car parked down the block, its interior light on. Someone was sitting inside watching the building. I alerted the agents, but by the time they checked, the car was gone. On the sidewalk, they found a rose, fresh, with a note tied to it. "She's mine now." It was my son's writing. My stomach churned. He knew we'd found Lena, and he was claiming her. The agent assured me she was safe, but I didn't believe it. As I lay back down, I heard a soft knock at my door. I opened it, but no one was there. On the floor was a small wrapped gift. Inside was a locket with a picture of Lena and my son. He was still pulling the strings, and I was just a puppet. The locket felt cold in my hand, my son's eyes staring back from the photo. I had to protect Lena from his influence before he dragged her into his darkness. If I failed, she'd become like him, and another generation would be lost. I couldn't let his legacy poison her. It would destroy me. The FBI raid on the laboratory was scheduled for noon, and I insisted on going, hoping to find answers about Project Phoenix. My son's influence was intensifying. That gift at my door showed he could reach me anywhere. The agents agreed, but only if I stayed in the car. We drove to the facility, a sleek building in a business park. Agents swarmed in, and I watched from the vehicle, my nerves on edge. Minutes later, they emerged with boxes of files and computers. One agent approached me, holding a tablet. "We found something you need to see," he said. It was a video diary from my son, recorded years ago. In it, he explained Project Phoenix, a plan to fake his death and escape, using a body double and forged documents. He'd been preparing for this since his first surgery, stockpiling money and identities. The video ended with him saying, "When the time comes, I'll be reborn. My blood ran cold. He wasn't just planning to escape. He was planning to disappear and start over. The agent confirmed they'd found evidence of the plan in the files, but it was already in motion. My son had triggers set, and his arrest might have activated them. We returned to the safe house, and I felt despair creeping in. How could I stop someone who had planned for everything? That afternoon, the agent received a call. Lena had run away from her foster home. She left a note saying she was going to find her father. Panic set in. We had to find her before she did something reckless. The FBI tracked her phone to a bus station downtown, and we rushed there. When we arrived, the station was crowded, but I spotted her near a ticket counter, looking scared and alone. I approached slowly, calling her name. She turned, her eyes wide. "I have to see him," she said. "He needs me." I tried to reason with her, but she pulled away. Just then, a man in a hoodie grabbed her arm. It was one of my son's associates from the storage unit. I screamed for help, and agents tackled him. Lena was shaking, and I held her close. "He told me you'd try to stop me," she whispered. We took her back to the safe house, and she calmed down after some food and talk. She revealed that my son had been sending her letters, telling her I was unstable and that she had to help him cleanse the family. It was brainwashing, pure and simple. The agents decided to move us to a new location, farther away. As we packed, Lena handed me a letter she'd hidden. "He said to give this to you if we met," she said. I opened it. It was a detailed map of my house's basement, with markings for hidden compartments I never knew about. One was labeled Legacy. My son had left something there, something he wanted me to find. The house was a burned shell, but maybe it survived. I told the agents, and they agreed to escort us there the next day. That night, I couldn't sleep, thinking about what legacy meant. Was it more evidence or another trap? Early the next morning, we drove to my property. The house was a charred ruin, the garden ash. Agents sifted through the debris, and in the basement, under a collapsed beam, they found a fireproof safe. It was intact. They opened it, and inside was a USB drive and a letter. The letter was from my son, written recently. "If you're reading this, I'm already free," it said. "But I left you a choice. Take the drive and expose everything, or destroy it, and I'll leave you alone. Your move, Mom." The USB contained files on everyone involved, enough to bring down the entire network, but it felt like another test. The agent urged me to hand it over, but I hesitated. What if this was his way of forcing my hand? As I stood there, Lena touched my arm. "He said you'd hesitate," she said. "That's why he has a backup." She pointed to the garden, where a single rosebush had survived the fire. Under it, we found a small box with a phone. It rang as we picked it up. I answered, and my son's voice came through, calm and clear. "I'm out, Mum, and I'm watching." The line went dead. I looked at the agents, their faces shocked. He had escaped, just as he planned. The USB drive in my hand felt like a timer, and I didn't know if I was holding the solution or the trigger. The phone went dead in my hand, my son's voice still ringing in my ears. He was free, and I held the USB drive that could either end this or spark another nightmare. I had to decide quickly: use it to expose his entire network or destroy it as he offered, in exchange for peace. If I chose wrong, I might lose Lena forever, or give him the chance to vanish completely. If I failed, the consequences were unimaginable. I'd spent months fighting, and my sanity felt frayed. My son's escape proved his reach was endless. He had people everywhere, even in the system meant to hold him. The FBI agents around me were tense, their radios crackling with updates on the prison break. Lena clung to my side, her eyes wide with fear. I slipped the USB into my pocket, my mind racing. Then, one agent's phone buzzed. A report of a sighting my son near the old warehouse district. They mobilized instantly, leaving 2 agents with us. As they drove off, the safe house felt exposed. I suggested we move to a more secure location, but the remaining agent hesitated, checking his device. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died, plunging us into darkness. Backup generators should have kicked in, but nothing happened. We fumbled for flashlights, and I heard a window slide open upstairs. The agent drew his weapon, motioning for us to stay back. Footsteps creaked on the floor above, slow and deliberate. A voice called down, "Eleanor, I know you have it?" It was the hospital chief, his tone icy. He shouldn't be here. He was supposed to be in custody. Lena gasped, and I pulled her closer. The agent advanced up the stairs, but a shot rang out, and he crumpled. I grabbed Lena and bolted for the back door, but it was locked from the outside. We were trapped. The chief descended, a gun in hand, smiling. "Robert sends his regards," he said. But as he reached for me, Lena screamed and threw a vase, shattering it against his head. He staggered, and I shoved him aside, grabbing his dropped gun. We burst out the door into the alley, but a car screeched to a halt, blocking our path. The driver stepped out. It was Mr. Gable, freed somehow, his face grim. "Get in," he said. I hesitated, but he showed a badge. It was FBI, undercover all along. My mind reeled. He'd been working to infiltrate my son's network. We climbed in, and he sped away. As we turned the corner, I saw the chief stumbling after us, but he was gone in the rear view. Mr. Gable explained he'd been deep undercover for years, gathering evidence. "The USB is key," he said, "but we have to act fast. Robert's planning something big." I felt a glimmer of hope, but then Mr. Gable's phone buzzed. He read a message and paled. "They have Lena's foster family," he said. "He's using them as leverage." I looked at Lena, her face tear-streaked. My son was always one step ahead, and now he'd struck where it hurt most. We had to save them, but I didn't know if we could trust Mr. Gable anymore. As we drove, I noticed he was taking a route away from the city, into the woods. "Where are we going?" I asked. He didn't answer, his knuckles white on the wheel. The trees closed in around us, and I realized we were heading toward the cabin where this all began. My son was waiting there. I was sure of it. But why would Mr. Gable bring us to him? Unless he was still on his side. I gripped the gun tighter, my heart pounding. The car slowed, and Mr. Gable turned to me, his eyes sad. "I'm sorry, Eleanor," he said, "but he has my daughter too." He pointed ahead, and I saw the cabin, lights on inside. My son stood on the porch, smiling. He held a little girl by the hand, Mr. Gable's daughter. We were all pawns in his game, and I had no moves left. The cabin loomed in the headlights, my son standing there like a ghost from my nightmares. I had to protect Lena and Mr. Gable's daughter, even if it meant facing him alone. If I failed, more innocent lives would be lost, and I'd never forgive myself. I stood to lose everything. My family, my peace, my very soul. My son's smirk was a knife in my heart. He had orchestrated this perfectly, using children as shields. Mr. Gable parked the car, his hands shaking. "He promised to let her go if I brought you," he whispered. I stepped out, the gun hidden in my coat, my body trembling. My son greeted me warmly, as if we were at a family reunion. "Mum, so good of you to come," he said. He ushered us inside, where the cabin was furnished with medical equipment, a makeshift operating room. He planned to finish what he started. Lena and the little girl were seated in a corner, terrified. I had to stall him, find a weakness. I showed him the USB. "Is this what you want?" I asked. He laughed. "That's just a decoy. The real evidence is in your pocket, the journal scans." My blood ran cold. How did he know? Then I remembered Mr. Gable had access to my things. He was the leak. My son explained he'd planted the USB as a test, to see if I'd betray him. But I had the scans on a micro SD card I'd hidden in my locket. He didn't know about that. This was my only advantage. I played along, acting defeated. "What do you want, Robert?" I said. He gestured to the table. "A final surgery, to make you forget. Then we all move on." Mr. Gable looked away, ashamed. I knew I had to act fast. Suddenly, Lena stood up. "I won't let you hurt her," she said, her voice strong. She threw a hidden knife from her sleeve, hitting my son in the arm. He cried out, and chaos erupted. Mr. Gable tackled him, and I rushed to the girls, ushering them toward the door. But my son recovered quickly, pulling the knife out. "You're all traitors," he snarled. He lunged at me, but I fired the gun, hitting the ceiling as a warning. The sound echoed, and outside, sirens wailed. The FBI had followed us. Agents stormed the cabin, subduing my son and Mr. Gable. As they cuffed them, my son laughed. "You think this is over? I have fail-safes everywhere." An agent handed me a tablet. It showed live feeds of multiple locations, including Lena's school and my old neighborhood. Bombs were planted, set to detonate at dawn unless I called them off. But I had no codes. My son smiled. "Only I can stop it, Mom, and I won't." The agents dragged him away, but the threat remained. I looked at the micro SD card in my locket. It held the key to his network. But would it be enough? As we drove back to safety, I noticed Lena was unusually quiet. She handed me a note she'd picked up from the cabin floor. It was a list of names, judges, politicians, all involved. At the bottom, my son had written, "The legacy continues." I realized he'd been grooming Lena to take over, and she might have been willing. Her eyes met mine, and I saw a flicker of his coldness in them. The car hit a bump, and the note fluttered away, but the damage was done. I didn't know if I could save her from him, or if she even wanted to be saved. The sun was rising as we returned to a new safe house, the bomb threats still looming. I had to use the micro SD card to expose the network and find a way to disable the bombs before innocent people died. If I failed, cities would burn, and my son's legacy of terror would live on. The weight was crushing. I hadn't slept properly in days, and my hands shook constantly. My son's fail-safes were a constant pressure. Even in custody, he controlled the game. The FBI set up a command center in the safe house, technicians working to trace the bombs. I gave them the micro SD card, and they started decrypting the files. Lena sat with me, her silence deafening. I needed to reach her, to pull her back from the edge. "He manipulated you, Lena," I said softly. She looked away. "He said you were weak, that I had to be strong." My heart broke. Just then, the technicians found something. The bombs were linked to a central server, and the codes were hidden in the files. But they needed a password, something only my son would know. I thought back to our past, to things he loved as a child. His favorite book was Frankenstein. He always identified with the monster. I suggested it, and it worked. The server unlocked, and they began disabling the bombs one by one. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. An agent approached, his face grave. We found something else, he said. Project Phoenix wasn't just about escape. It was about immortality. He stored his memories and plans on a cloud server, with AI to continue his work if he died. My son had created a digital ghost, and it was already active. The AI was sending commands, reorganizing his network. We had to shut it down, but the location was encrypted. Lena spoke up. I know where it is, she said. He told me, it's in the basement of our old home, but it's wireless, connected everywhere. My burned house again. We had to go back. The agents agreed, and we drove there, the morning light revealing the devastation. The basement was partially collapsed, but we dug through the rubble. Under a metal plate, we found a server rack, humming softly. It was powered by a hidden generator. As we prepared to destroy it, my son's voice echoed from a speaker. Too late, Mom. I'm already in the system. The AI had taken over, and it started a countdown. 10 minutes until it released all the evidence publicly, causing chaos. But it also revealed my son's true plan: to frame me as the mastermind, with forged documents showing I orchestrated everything. The agents worked frantically to disconnect it, but the system was booby-trapped. Lena stepped forward, her eyes determined. He taught me how to disable it, she said. She typed a code into a terminal, and the countdown paused. But then, the system recognized her and initiated a new protocol. It began uploading data to unknown locations. We had to physically destroy it. I found a fire axe and swung at the servers, sparks flying. The AI screamed through the speaker, my son's voice distorted. You can't stop progress, Mom. I kept swinging until the humming stopped. Silence fell. We stood in the wreckage, breathing heavily. The agents confirmed the upload was stopped, but some data might have escaped. Lena looked at me. Her expression softened. I'm sorry, she said. I hugged her, feeling a flicker of hope. But as we climbed out, an agent handed me a phone. It was a news alert. An anonymous source had just released documents implicating me in the surgeries. The AI had succeeded in part. My name was now Mud, and the world thought I was the monster. I looked at Lena, and she squeezed my hand. We'll fix this, she said. But I wondered if it was too late. The media vans were already pulling up outside, and I had nowhere to hide. The media swarm descended on my property, cameras flashing and reporters shouting questions. I had to clear my name and prove my innocence before the world condemned me. If I failed, I'd spend my last years in prison, and Lena would be alone with this legacy. I risked losing my freedom and any chance at a normal life. The forged documents were convincing, and my son's AI had done its job well. The FBI tried to hold them back, but the story was going viral. We retreated to the safe house, but it was compromised. Reporters followed us. I needed hard evidence to counter the lies. Lena remembered something. My son had a habit of recording everything, including his confessions, on a private server she knew about. We accessed it remotely and found videos of him admitting to everything, even bragging about framing me. This was the proof we needed. But as we prepared to release it, the system alerted us. The AI had a backup, and it was trying to delete the files. We had to act fast. I contacted a trusted journalist, sending her the videos. She promised to broadcast them immediately. Within hours, the tide turned. The public saw the truth, and my name began to be cleared. But my son wasn't done. From prison, he managed to send a message. You win this round, Mom, but remember, I always have a plan B. The agents increased his security, but I felt uneasy. Lena and I started rebuilding our relationship, talking about the future. She wanted to study medicine, to redeem the family name. I supported her, but I worried the darkness was in her blood. Days passed, and things calmed. The FBI assured me the network was dismantled, and my son was in solitary confinement. I decided to visit him one last time, to say goodbye. At the prison, he looked older, worn down. "Why, Robert?" I asked. He smiled sadly. "Because I could, Mom, and because you always tried to stop me." He handed me a letter. "For Lena," he said. "Don't read it." I took it, my hands trembling. As I left, I felt a strange closure. But back at the safe house, I couldn't resist. I opened the letter. It was a detailed plan for a new identity for Lena, with funds and instructions to disappear. He wanted her to run, to avoid the shame. I burned it, deciding to protect her from his influence. That night, I dreamed of my garden, whole and blooming, with Lena laughing among the roses. I woke up feeling lighter. The next morning, the agent informed me that my son had attempted suicide in his cell, but was saved. He was now under constant watch. I didn't know how to feel, relief or sorrow. Lena and I planted a new rosebush in the garden of a small home we rented, a fresh start. But as we dug, I found another metal box. Inside was a single key and a note. "For when you're ready." It was from my son, planted years ago. I didn't know what it unlocked, and I didn't care. I threw it away. We finished planting, the sun warm on our backs. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. But that evening, as I sat on the porch, I saw a shadow figure across the street. It looked like my son, but when I blinked, it was gone. A trick of the light, I told myself, yet the unease lingered. I went inside and locked the door, holding Lena close. We were safe for now, but I knew some ghosts never leave. The days settled into a quiet rhythm, the chaos of the past receding like a bad dream. Lena and I lived in a small cottage on the outskirts of town, away from the memories that haunted us. I tended to the garden, planting roses and vegetables, while Lena attended school online, her focus on biology and healing. We didn't talk much about what happened. Some wounds were too deep to poke. Now, I simply wanted to build a peaceful life for us, to replace the darkness with light. If I failed, the shadows of my son's legacy might still claim us, but I was determined to succeed. This peace required vigilance. I still jumped at loud noises, and I checked the locks twice each night. My son was in a maximum security facility, his communications monitored, but his influence felt like a stain I couldn't wash out. One afternoon, while cleaning out an old box, I found a photo album from before everything went wrong. Pictures of Robert as a boy, smiling and innocent, brought tears to my eyes. I showed them to Lena, and she cried too, for the father she never really knew. We decided to visit his grave. He'd been declared legally dead after his suicide attempt failed, but left him brain dead, and we'd donated his organs. It was a quiet gesture of redemption. At the cemetery, we placed flowers on the plot, and Lena said a few words. "I forgive you," she whispered, and I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. On the way home, we stopped at a diner, and for the first time, we laughed over milkshakes like a normal family. That night, I sat on the porch, watching the stars. The air was cool, and the scent of roses filled the breeze. I thought about all I'd lost, my home, my son, my trust, but also what I'd gained. A granddaughter, a second chance, and a strength I never knew I had. The past would always be a part of me, but it no longer defined me. I went inside and kissed Lena goodnight, her breathing even and calm. In my room, I opened a journal of my own, writing down our story, not for revenge, but for remembrance. As I closed it, I felt a final release. The garden outside was thriving, and in the morning, we'd plant more roses. The quiet, personal resolution I'd longed for was here, in the simple acts of living and loving. I turned off the light, and for the first time in years, I slept without dreaming.